Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Grandma Has ADHD. You might notice that I've got a different screen behind me, and that's because we had to move away from my normal podcast platform and pivot to Zoom. I love having ADHD because I am able to think quickly and pivot. And I also feel very strongly that perfect is the enemy of done. So even though this isn't my preferred platform, here we are. And I am excited to introduce Julia Rice. She is an ADHD coach based in Raleigh, North Carolina, who helps adults navigate challenges, work towards goals, build self-awareness, and co-create strategies for living and working better with ADHD. While many of her clients are entrepreneurs, leaders, and driven professionals, Julia has a passion for people and their whole complex lives and works with adults across all life stages. Having ADHD herself, her greatest joy is in holding supportive space and providing thoughtful partnership for fellow neurodivergent folks and others. She coaches with versatility, creativity, warmth, enthusiasm, humor, authenticity, and curiosity. Before coaching full-time, Julia worked in a director of leadership development, program management, design education, and organizational strategy with a mental health counseling approach. With a background in design and clinical mental health. And I'm not editing.
So that's a lot.
You guys are going to hear it as it goes. With background in design and clinical mental health counseling, her approach is informed by psychology, design thinking, neuroscience, and cognition as they pertain to life and work. Whew, that reads like an ADHD bio, I have to say. Both the
Can you tell that's an ADHD?
in the description and the amount of work that you have done. And to those of you who are listening, I have 55-year-old eyes. And when I look at the bio on StreamYard, it's bigger. I can see it better. So I apologize for all the fumbling. Welcome, Julia. I'm not usually that messed up.
Jami, that was great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah. So Julie and I connected through a coaching and a book club for ADHD coaches through which you've heard me mention before. And I was excited because she is one of the coaches that also likes to work with seniors. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So I got it right mostly, other than the jarbled. But I always like to start with people's ADHD journey and hear how you got here. So I'd love to hear, when did you discover you had ADHD, and then take us backwards.
Thank you. I was diagnosed, like many women, in my late 30s. I had that perfect storm of the pandemic and a new job environment, new family responsibilities, and approaching perimenopause. And I had always operated a little bit differently, and I had different ways of doing things, different challenges. My brain worked differently. But I think I had naturally adapted systems and strategies so early on that I didn't even know that I had accommodated myself, that I had been in fairly accommodating environments. And so with all these changes, all of a sudden, it was like my symptoms were turned up to volume 11, and the things that I had in place or had done to accommodate myself and to support myself, they either weren't available or they just weren't working anymore. They just weren't cutting it. So I talked with my doctor doctor and kind of described what I was noticing, and it just clicked for both of us. Like, oh, this sounds a lot like ADHD. So it wasn't easy to relearn my brain, give myself the kindness and patience I needed to figure things out. But getting diagnosed for me was fantastic. I loved having that understanding of it. Like, your brain works differently. It was like finding puzzle pieces and realizing I don't know how all this goes together yet, but I know that it will, or it can, if I work on it. So I believe acceptance is a beautiful thing because it gives us something to focus on. And if we know where to look and how to look at things and kind of what to expect along the way, we can get going on it. We can get working with our brains and be more likely to see a positive difference. So
You have a lot that I want to unpack right there. One of the things that you mentioned that I had not heard in any of my previous podcasts was the COVID. And I've heard that a lot of people found out or discovered that they had ADHD during COVID. What do you think it was about COVID that led to uncovering that?
I think it was just suddenly needing to do everything kind of differently and sort of having to troubleshoot. You don't have your regular routines in place anymore. For many of us, we weren't able to go into work every day. So that process, that routine was suddenly, I didn't realize it, but I did a lot of processing on my commute. Like, I kind of unpacked the day or mentally prepared for the day. And so I had that in place. And then I started a new job. And so I was supporting an organization that was navigating the pandemic and thinking about all kinds of different operations that they were going to have to take on differently. And so I think for myself, maybe for others, it puts a lot of strain on your executive functioning naturally. And it may be more of a challenge all of a sudden. So
Yes.
I can't speak for everybody, but
Yeah.
that's my answer in a nutshell.
I had other epiphanies during COVID, but I will tell you the way that you described the puzzle, I felt like I was getting a playbook to my life. And I have to tell you, one of the things that I love about having ADHD is that we tend to be very curious and we're constant learners. And just this morning, I heard about sleeping in the T-Rex position. Have you heard of this before?
No,
So
but I'm really
people-
curious.
So people with ADHD tend to sleep with their arms up and tight in, and so that there can be a lot of wrist tension.
Doing this?
I don't know about that. I don't do that I'm aware of, but I definitely sleep like bundled in. And I'm like, oh, a new one that I just learned. So it's just uncovering and unraveling. And I think that's sort of what's happening in real time for so many people who I'm actually recording the podcast in my 17-year-old daughter's room because it's where I get good internet reception. She is in here now, but we just discovered her ADHD a couple of months ago. So
That's exciting.
even
Hello
if I
to
knew
your
that my
daughter.
oldest child had it, it looks very different on my 17-year-old. But anyway, so thank you for sharing that story. So how about your childhood? Do you see any connection to ADHD as a child?
I actually, they say that it starts in childhood. And so I think I was one of those that wanted to be up and moving around and curious and interested in so many, distracted, wanting to take on had a lot of different interests. Always have. When I got diagnosed, I actually talked with different family members about it and found that some family members had it, but spoke to my mom about it because I started realizing, like, I think some of my stuff looks like some of your stuff. And she said, oh, yeah, that's probably what I said. So that's probably me as well. But also, so she had been a fourth grade teacher for like over 30 years. And so she had that impression of ADHD was that classic stereotype that it looks like a little boy who can't sit still in the classroom is running around. And she just had not ever gotten exposed to like all the diversity really that is within ADHD in itself. And so she was kind of like, but I'm smart and capable. How could this be me? And so we talked about it, that it looks different on everybody that has it. And it also, there's different combinations, lots of different kinds of symptoms that aren't even in the DSM maybe, and they're expressed differently for different people. My dad has passed away now, but we kind of wonder if like he may have had it as well, but his presented very differently. I think he was maybe more hyperactive, whereas my mom and I are more combined type. And so they're both very bright, very social, very adaptive folks. And I realized that I probably grew up in a household that we had a lot of ways of living and operating that affirmed our ADHD without knowing that that's what we were doing. And then also being able to cope with our challenges without knowing that that's what we were doing. So I was very fortunate in that respect, but there are also a lot of like, I didn't have all that clear understanding until mid adulthood.
So were your parents married? Did they stay married until your father passed?
They did. They were married for over 50 years
Right.
and they were a team.
There's a higher divorce rate among people with ADHD, which I have lots of theories behind that, but I always like to ask that question. So I actually have a father who was hyperactive. And so when my half brother was diagnosed, it was very clear where he had gotten it from because my dad, you could see it in family videos, but I didn't discover that my mother had it until less than 2 years ago. And she was the impetus behind grandma has ADHD because to your point, it can look so different. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing, you're now hearing Benji, my dog, who was
You
walking.
might hear Neighbor, my dog, who is with us as well.
Oh, okay, nice. Yes, I'm talking about you, Benji. Well, never mind. Anyway,
Neighbor is sound asleep.
we're all good for you. And of course, then I forget my words because he has just distracted me, right? We don't do well with transitions. But
We were talking about
yes,
COVID.
how it looked so different and how that's why I didn't realize that my child had it because it looks so different than my daughter had it than my oldest child. So, okay, thank you, thank you. See, now you're seeing ADHD playing itself in real life, and to your
Hey, same.
acceptance, and that is one of the critical things. And I actually had a previous guest on a podcast who said that she was diagnosed at 57, and at 67, she said knowing that she has ADHD is permission to be herself, which I
Wow.
love that. And actually, it was what I titled her episode because it was so profound and so right on. And when we accept who we are, our lives are just better than fighting it. It's like what you resist persists.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That was something that for me, after I got diagnosed, shortly after I was turning 40, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to revisit who I am. I'm going to be more of myself again. And that
And
was,
yeah,
I loved that. That was like a gift.
I agree. And that's like for seniors who are evaluating, and it's normal for them to evaluate their lives. Like I've talked about gerotranscendence and sort of making peace with decisions and the relationships. And when they came to crossroads, what decisions did they make? And just kind of evaluating it and then evaluating it with an ADHD lens, right? And then an understanding, which is exactly why we are here today, because I want to contribute towards that self-acceptance for seniors. So how did your mom feel like when you guys talked about it? How did she take it?
I think it made a lot of sense to her, but also she is a very methodical person. And so she has those systems in place and she's got a lot going for her that really works for her at home. She stays very active, she stays very social. She's always taking on new projects, creative pursuits. She needs the time that she needs to think through things, but like she always gets there. She has very good follow through, which is great. She takes notes about absolutely everything. And so she has her records. So she navigates it fairly well. And I don't know that she will ever pursue formal diagnosis, but it's something that she is learning about in her own way as well.
Got it dialed in. Would you say, I know the other way that it can impact people, even when they have systems, is that anxiety or the rejection sensitivity. Does she have any of that?
Not so much. I think I've had more of that than she has. She's more in the camp of she's always been herself. She has some impulsivity. I will say that. She grew up on a farm. And when she was very young, they had these big beef cattle. She wanted to have a horse. This was in the 50s. There's all kinds of cowboys and cowgirls on TV, and she wanted to ride a horse. And so she looked at this big white face beef cattle and she said, I think I'll try it. Sleeping in the pasture. And she said, I think I'll try to give him a ride. And it got up and just bucked her off. And she just wanted to make that happen. And so she's one that kind of jumps into things, but she also has a very keen sense of people. I think she's got really strong intuition. She's, like I said, stayed really connected to her community. And that I think has really helped her a lot over the years. But she does get overwhelmed with things. And so she and my dad were such a strong partnership that after he passed, I said, I can be like your backup brain. I'm not going to make decisions for you, but I can look through, I can dig in and do research for you and kind of lay out some options and help kind of reduce some of that overwhelm. And then you decide, and then we work on it together. So yeah, it's interesting when you lose one and your parents are together and you lose one parent because your relationship with the other does change. And that's something that is interesting to navigate. We're still learning.
Nice. Well, I'm sorry that you lost your dad, and I'm glad that you're, continuing to reinvent, which is such an ADHD, as is intuition. It's like every time I do an interview and I hear another trait, I'm like, oh, ADHD, that's a trait, that's a trait. So I would like to know, you said you were working as a coach with adults, and then you decided to also start to work with seniors. So, a lot of people, and I didn't recognize ADHD in seniors myself, which was why when I suddenly started to look back at all of these clients that I had worked with that had clutter problems, I was like, wait a minute, they had ADHD also, right? And so for me, who've been working with seniors for 11 years in their homes and didn't make the connection that they also had ADHD until less than 2 years ago. So tell me about what made you decide to work with seniors.
I intended I'm going to work with like mid-career adults, middle-aged folks like myself, but I didn't decide to work with seniors until actually someone was referred to me, and I thought about it. And with my background as a therapist and an educator, I've spent years working with folks across the lifespan, and I've really enjoyed working with clients who are approaching those retirement years, entering their senior years, navigating their senior years. I'm also an only child of older adults. And so when you are an only child, you kind of have a closer relationship with your parents. You're not a peer, but you're a little closer to that. And then, so I was a little bit more in tuned into their aging early on and taking the role of supporting them as they got older. And so, like I said, when I started my coaching practice, I tell you to set your focus and say, okay, I'm going to work with middle-aged folks, middle-aged adults. And, but started working with, got some referrals and started working with folks who are across the lifespan. Now I have clients as young as 18, as old as 72 right now. I'm so glad that I do. I've always loved lifespan development. Each stage in life is so special and different in its own way. Our brains and bodies change, our goals, our purpose changes throughout our lives. You never stop learning about who you are.
I hope not. When people say, well, why does it matter? Why does it matter for a senior to discover they have ADHD? And I'm like, well, do you want to stop learning at any point? Like if your brain is intact, do you want to start improving your life, or do we just sit on that rocking chair and just wait till we pass? It's like, that's one of my really passionate about.
And I think a lot of folks with ADHD like would want to learn throughout their lives, Yeah. And our thinking changes, our behavior changes, how we interact with the world changes, right? So a lot of my most successful moments that I could remember as a therapist and educator had to do with that lifespan and learning to adjust through the life stages or help somebody else, how to help folks, help others learn how to adjust, whether through adolescence or into those senior years. So naturally, it's become one of my favorite aspects of coaching as well.
So I want to take a break, but when we come back, I have two questions that I want to ask you. One is if you could share maybe an older adult that you've worked in coaching who has ADHD and how you helped them and what you would do in coaching. And then I always like to ask the button question. If you could press a button and turn off your ADHD, would you? So we're going to pause because I've got a very aggressive Benji who is distracting me, and I need to do something with him, even though he was
Okay.
for the podcast. We're going to pause, and then when we come back with Julia, she is going to answer those questions. Are you tired of feeling like you can't get it together? Struggling with clutter that overwhelms you despite your best efforts? Wondering why organization feels impossible while others make it look so easy? You're not alone, and it's not your fault. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro, host of the Grandma Has ADHD podcast, and I understand exactly what you're going through. I combine my years of hands-on work as founder of Silver Linings Transitions, a move management and home organizing company, together with ADHD coach training, and help adults 50 and over connect the dots between ADHD and lifelong struggles. Whether you're downsizing, decluttering, or simply trying to create systems that work for your ADHD brain, I provide virtual and in-person coaching for those in the San Diego area. Together, we'll develop practical strategies that honor how your brain actually works, not how you think it should work. Ready to trade shame for understanding? Visit grandmahasadhd.com or call to schedule a discovery session at 760-607-7377, because it's never too late to finally make sense of your story. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. So we are back with Julia, and I have kicked Benji out of the room because even though Julia said she couldn't hear him, for me, it was that little nagging distraction and I couldn't pay full attention to Julia. So when we left for our break, I told you there were two questions I was going to ask. One was, could you describe how working with an older adult as a coach, what their challenges and issues might be and how they might differ from another person that you would work with?
Sure. I think if it's a different stage of life, and a lot of my clients, they have never been in coaching before, never been in therapy. Some have been in therapy, but not coaching. And so it's about learning what the difference between the two is, which I know you've talked about some on the podcast. I find that one of the things I help my senior clients with the most is figuring out how to recognize, reframe, and communicate their needs and their wants and their experiences, what they're going through, and to acknowledge that difference, communicate it to loved ones. Because sometimes it's about building that awareness first, is that, hey, we're going through changes. These are some of the things that are going on now. We're so interest-based that sometimes we don't want to have to deal with the ways that we change. But getting comfortable with getting help, with the idea of having some help rather than doing things all ourselves. We don't like to be told what to do. Folks with ADHD, we're go-getters a lot of times, and we can have a really hard time delegating. So figuring out what kind of options we might have. Also exploring how, when we're so wired for that autonomy and wanting to be independent, how getting help can actually support that, right? Because it can mean that we're more easily able to get things done. So if you can kind of get rooted in your strengths and then find folks that are good at other things. I've also have adult clients with ADHD who have aging parents and need to figure out, how do I communicate with them? So they're getting their needs met, but I'm getting my needs met too. And so a lot of times it's working through strategies for that as well, but in natural ADHD fashion. So what I talk with all of my clients about, we really dig into the strengths, which I know that from your training at ADGA, we talk about what are our strengths. And I had a client who I will say worked in a position where she supported a large community, and she was great. She was like the Pied Piper. Everybody loved her, but she, being in charge of this community, had an issue that she had to sort out with a bank. And she was like, forms. This is our form. And yeah, forms allowed to do what? And it was someone who had moved on that no longer, then they wanted to move banks. And she's like, I've got to get this done, but I am paralyzed.
So when you said that, I said forms. It's like,
it makes your skin crawl, does it not? It makes my skin crawl too.
And I will not do something because I have to complete a form. It's something that I want to do, but that form is that, it's that block me.
And that's exactly what had been going on with her. She had been putting it off, but she was like, it's hanging over my head and I need to get it done. And so we talked through, and she didn't want to ask anybody for help. And I said, when you go into that bank, whoever's there, I bet they're pretty good at working with folks that have similar questions, dealing with this kind of thing. I think, what if you just go in and say hey, I'm pretty exasperated by this. Maybe this is kind of a doozy and I'm hoping you can help me. And then also just kind of expecting it's going to be a messy process. It's going to take a few steps, but we'll find out what that first one is, right? And then we'll go from there. And so
I've been thinking that we need to have accommodations for wheelchairs and we need to have a society that accommodates the ADHD brain. Because I don't know if you have ever had this, but prior to online bill paying, where you could just set it up for auto pay,
Mhm.
I was constantly getting late fees, just constantly. And wouldn't it be great if there was some sort of life accommodation where you get accommodations for forms and you get accommodations for technology and you get accommodations for late payments? As you were saying that, of course, and I had to vocalize it because you also know that when your brain holds on to something, you can't
Oh,
let
yeah.
you get it
Yeah,
out.
it'll go, and that was a good one. That's really important. Like, I didn't say to this client, like, you could go and be like, "Look, I have ADHD, okay? Like, my brain is trying to work on all the pieces and parts at the same time. It's all trying to go through the funnel at once." I'm a fan of kind of saying, like, "I have ADHD, and this is how things are going for me, and this is what I need. Like, here, tell me
That's
what is the first thing." Yeah. Just to normalize. There's a lot of us out in the world. Brains may need a little bit of help filtering, right? Like, which is the thing that's most important first. We may need to be able to talk it through with somebody else. That's another thing with my mom is she's a verbal processor. And so she'll text me and be like, "I need to talk." And I know that she needs to verbalize things
Mhm.
and I need to listen and reframe what she's saying. And she's going to be able to figure it out most of the time or figure out who she needs to talk to. But knowing your brain and learning what do I need to ask for. And in the situation with this client, it was a couple of steps process, but once she gets going on something, she's very persistent and she started not just getting help from one person, but getting help from other people. And we talked about it, and she realized, like, yeah, my strength is kind of rallying folks behind a cause or rallying folks. And I'm a good leader. And
Mhm.
part of being a good leader is knowing how to recognize when you're not good at something and you need to call on somebody else to help you out with that.
Right.
And you need to like cheer them on and be like, "Thank you. You are so great at this."
Yeah. No, right. And I want to also highlight another thing that you mentioned
Mhm.
was that a lot of seniors, I don't remember what you said, but they are usually a little more reluctant to acknowledge that they have ADHD or any other neurodiversity, then so they don't get the help. And they also aren't as likely to ask for help, which is another reason that when people like just step into it, hey, this is what's going on. And that's exactly why I do the podcast the way that I do it. I could have it all edited and cut up, but I'm like, no, that's not who I am. And that's not how my life goes. So people saw me lose a word, right? They saw me lose my thought, and that.
Yeah.
And now when I give a presentation, by the way, whether I'm giving it on the subject of ADHD or I do a lot of presentations about decluttering and downsizing, and I tell people from the beginning, I have ADHD, so please turn off your phones because if your phone goes off, I'm going to lose my train of thought. Yeah, I own it. I just
Yeah.
step into it and you're going to see me lose words. And now I'm so much more comfortable. And so, like I said, when I am myself, I give you permission to be yourself. And then that trickles out into our listeners like, oh, yeah. And the other thing that I think is
Yeah.
amazing is interviewing all of these amazing people with ADHD. And like I said, when I was reading your bio, I'm amazed at all of the things that people with ADHD are able to do. And yes, we don't work the same job for 20 years, but we're pretty amazing people and we pivot and we find our strengths and yes, we go on to our next interest. But that's probably my favorite part of the whole podcast is just really like getting to hear other people's stories and
Yeah.
connecting.
Well, I wanted to say something on something that you just said while I'm trying to like hold it in my working memory sticky note about living essentially and saying like when you're having a moment when there's something with ADHD going on, like I just forgot what I was going to say. It will come right back to me. Or look, I need you to put your phones away. It's just as important for me to not be distracted. I have found that I was a little concerned at first when going out into the world and saying I'm an ADHD coach, I have ADHD, and kind of telling folks about it. Stigma is real. And I was a little nervous about that, especially at the background of the therapist. You don't disclose a lot of things about yourself personally. But as a coach, well, what I found is that being myself, my authentic self, having ADHD is such an asset to how I can help clients because it's such a complex thing that affects all areas of your life. But if you live with it real time, you get it and they can sense that. And if you lose track of something or if you forget what you were saying, it's almost makes space and gives a little bit of permission for that to be perfectly normal, if whatever normal might be. And I've also found like going out into the world in different business environments and other leadership environments. When I introduce myself as an ADHD coach, I meet so many people. They're like, oh my God, I have ADHD. And I think to myself, you would never be telling anybody that in this networking event or business function had someone not said, this is what I do. So I just appreciate you saying that because I love moving through the world in that way as
And
well.
I will say that I can't even imagine going to an ADHD coach who didn't understand how it feels, right? Like, so if you're not watching and you're listening, Julie's eyes just like a super fit. It's because our brains
Yeah.
wired differently. I don't like the word disorder because we're just wired differently. I
Yeah.
want back to another thing that you said because it's something that I really struggle with, and I apologize now. I do tend to cut people off a lot, and it's because either I'm really excited and I'm like, oh, I've got to share this,
I get it.
or I'm going to forget if I don't put it out. Like I happen to be, as we're sitting here taking notes, but I can't do that in normal conversations otherwise, right? So how do you put a sticky note on something? I would love to know what your tip is.
I'm not sure I have a great tip.
Yeah.
Well, you just said one. Actually, I usually have a notepad and a pen everywhere I go. I process really well. Taking notes helps me focus. And I tell clients that I work with me, I see clients all over the country virtually. And I say, if you see me looking down here, it's because I'm taking notes. And that is helping me focus on what you're saying, processing, remember things that I want to reflect back to you. And they're all like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So writing, definitely. That I think would be the best one that I can think of. Or it's just that, again, acceptance is a beautiful thing. Like if you can accept, hey, if it's really that great of a thought and I lose it, it'll come back or it won't. But yeah, note taking all day, every day.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So the one thing that you mentioned, and it's such a good segue, you said that you see clients virtually. So one of the things that I like to do when I interview people on the podcast is to let someone who really liked hearing you and connected with you find you so that they can work with you. So that's not going to be a question, but I want to make sure that we get that in. So who do you work with and how do they find you? Julia Rice.
Yes, I work with adults mostly. Like I said, my youngest client is 18. The oldest client right now is 72. Focusing on working with adults at the moment. If you would like to get in touch, you can go to my website. It's Julia Rice and Co. That's Julia Rice, ANDCO.com. And there's a form where you can sign up for a free discovery session. So that'll help us set up a call where we can chat. I can clarify more about what coaching is if you need, and we can see if we're a good fit. We can talk about what you might want to work on, what's going on. And I like to really thoroughly inform my clients so that they know what they're getting into and can make that decision. So I will send you some information to look over on your own in your own time. And then if you want to move forward, you'll have some links to do that. So it is internet-based, but it's a pretty straightforward process. So yes, juliariceandco.com.
That's RICE.
RICE. Yes.
Okay. All right. So here is the question that I always like to ask people. And then, of course, I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me anything that I didn't ask that you're like, oh, I wish I had said that. Button. If you could press a button and your ADHD would be gone, would you get rid of it?
I don't think so. Like that. Honestly, gut reaction is like, who would I be? But without my ADHD, I would be afraid I would lose too many of the characteristics I like so much about myself, quite honestly. And maybe I wouldn't, but I don't think ADHD is a superpower, but I think there's some really wonderful things about having ADHD too. So I don't think that I would. If I could press a button and turn it off and live for a day to see what it's like, and it's I mean, here's me being curious, right?
There you go, MacGyvering the question. You didn't just answer it the way it was asked, right?
No, I don't think so. I really don't.
So it's interesting. Only one person so far that since I've been asking the question has said yes, and then she kind of backtracked, and then you couldn't tell that she wasn't really certain about her decision. So it's interesting. If there are traits that I could get rid of them, right? But that's not the reality of life. Like you get the whole package. I know my boyfriend, we lived together, and he would love to like make sure that I'm closing cabinet drawer and not spilling all the time and not scratching surfaces of really nice pans or whatever. But then he doesn't get the fun, joyful light. It just comes together.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think it's a trade-off, and I would think I would miss it. And I also lived a lot of my life not even knowing that I had it. I think that is something to be kind of aware of as a coach is folks that are diagnosed younger may have had a different view of their ADHD. And I have clients that they had to kind of relearn what their relationship with their own ADHD was like over time and hopefully kind of build a better relationship with it. But it's too much fun. I think having ADHD, it's tough, but it's fun and we like a challenge, right?
We do. What would you say to somebody who's listening to this podcast who is just discovering this ADHD world and, oh my gosh, I've lived my whole life with it. Now what?
Mhm. Well, I think the first thing is something that Ned Hallowell says, just don't worry alone. Find somebody to talk to about it. Have somebody that you can bounce ideas with off of. So as you learn about your ADHD brain, get a coach who can support you in working through things. That whole thing of having a hard time filtering and having a hard time holding one thought in their head, a coach can help you do those things, right? They can reflect things back to you and bring those thoughts back when it's time to look at them closer. I think a coach can help you with your challenges, but also they can help you recognize your strengths as well and really lean into those. So on that note, find out what your strengths are and lean into them because they will ground you. If something's not your area of expertise, that's okay too. We're all different, got different strengths. I believe that we're here to help each other out as humans. And it's one of the best parts about being human is getting to support each other. So learn about how your brain works, communicate what you need, help your people help you, ask for what you need, but pay attention to what other people need as well. We're really good at getting wrapped up in our own things, our own passions, what we're interested in, what we've got going on. It's easy to overlook how we're affecting other people. So I think it's a really good idea to stay socially connected, find your people, help people share your strengths, and also accept help in areas that it's not your strength, right? And then lastly, I would say be kind to yourself. It's hard to do. We're really good at self-criticism and we probably have heard a lot of judgment over the years. But when you're navigating life with ADHD, it's important to have people in your corner, but also have yourself in your corner. Be in your corner. Don't be the person that's in the ring beating you up. So yeah.
I think that's been the number one thing that most people have shared. We've got to learn to be nice to ourselves. Okay. Anything else, any parting words before we end the episode? Because I always wish I had said that. And I don't want this conversation with.
I think you and I could probably talk for ages. And this has been so much fun. And I hope we can stay in touch and chat more down the line. But I really appreciate you having me and love your podcast. I think it's so important what you're doing. And I told my mom I was going to be a guest, and she said, "Oh, I want to listen to that podcast. I'm going to go."
She wants to be on it. She can.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I think we're on the East Coast, and I don't know if you ever work on the East Coast, but I have a feeling she could be a client for your business.
Well, I do virtual, and I'm actually going to be starting a group in October for ADHD Awareness Month. I'm not promoting it yet, but I'm going to be building a community of other people who are kind of coming into this together, and also the challenges that they have with decluttering and going through a lifetime of possessions. Yes. Tying it back to the work that I've been doing for 12 years, right? So
yes, that is just such a huge topic and for her. And so I just really admire what you do. And it's an honor and a joy to be on your podcast. So thank you so much. You just made my
day. Thank you so much. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to get in touch with Julia Rice, you can find her at juliariceandandco.com. And please share this podcast with your friends and family and join our ADHD, Grandma Has ADHD community. We are new, but again, people are sort of just discovering and coming to this conversation. And I am sure that already I've gotten such great feedback from people who are listening to the podcast and are connecting. And we're just going to keep going from here. So thanks so much for listening, and make the rest of your life the best of your life. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.